Once upon a time, the infamous rover Reynardo plundered the floating isles. Then his mother called him to her deathbed. "Swear to me that you won't die on the gallows," she rasped. Reluctantly, he swore. And he whiled away his days at home with music, cards, and wine. But the Emperor had changed. He'd been good once, a shy, almost humble toad. He'd built universities. But then people started whispering about mass graves in the woods, midnight rituals, victims screaming. The Imperial ravens would round up entire villages, and no one ever returned. The ravens had come to Ubar scouting for ancient books said to be of great power. But the librarians had hidden the books, so they'd burnt the librarians. The citizens, outraged, had driven them off. The ravens had come back with dropships. The kid had fled with one of those books. He was brave and dumb and wanted to join the rebellion. And Reynardo had promised his mother he'd protect him. The kid was looking down, watching his city burn. "Sorry, kid," Reynardo told the kid. "Look, if we give them the book, they'll leave you alone." "My mother died for this book!" "I promised her I'd protect you." "Oh, damn it." The kid had run off. With the book, of course. So Reynardo had to run after him. The two ravens were staring at the kid like he was their dinner, which probably was what was in their tiny brains. "Hey," Reynardo said. They cocked their heads at him. "Pick on someone as ugly as you." Wait, that didn't come out right. "For the Emperor!" The ravens cawed and rushed at him. Dropship flew overhead. He hoped they hadn't noticed him. The kid. Oh, right. The Gate of Heroes. Someone's idea of a joke, making the Skyship docks a gated community. And the kid was on the other side of the gate. "Who let you through? Promise me you'll take the book to the rebels, or I'm gonna steal your ship." "I'm not taking that damn book anywhere, and neither are you." "Try and stop me," laughed the kid. "I bet you don't even have a hero sword." And with that, the kid hopped away. Had to hand it to the kid. He was an idiot, but he had guts. Where was Reynardo going to get a hero sword? Ore and wind. Perfect. A hero sword. QED. This is what he got for settling down and finding people to care about. The kid's mum had been a swell cook, and she'd laughed at Reynardo's jokes, even when he didn't know he'd made one. And then the ravens had come to burn her. And she'd made him promise to protect the kid. But she never told him where the book was. Just the kid. He came up to a ledge. It was too far to jump. There'd been a bridge here before, hadn't there? And there was Peter, giggling at him. "How'd you get across?" he asked the kid. "Where'd you find a hook?" "I hopped," said the kid. Wise-ass kid. "Hey, look out behind you!" "Cute," said Reynardo. Ah, ravens. It was time to talk some sense into the kid. Just hook his way across the ledge and chase the kid down. Thing was, he hadn't used his hook since he'd retired. Damn it. maybe if he meditated at that altar there, he'd remember his old skills. It was starting to come back to him. Something you never completely forgot, like how to freeze time when attacking. The more he fought, the more he'd probably remember. And there was the Farfarer. She was the fastest ship he'd ever known. She could do the Kestrel run in 12 furlongs. Oh, so the salesman had told him. And something told him the kid was about to walk into an ambush. "Stop!" he shouted. "I'm not giving you the book!" shouted the kid, and took off. "No! Peter!" But the kid ran for it, and a goblin nailed him with its eyeball. The book was unburned. Next to it were the buckles from the kid's shoes, and a kid-sized pile of ashes. Damn it. Why hadn't he lied and told the kid he'd take the book to the rebels? The kid would be alive now. Really pissed off and betrayed, but alive. Oh, damn it. Reynardo picked up the book. He couldn't let the Empire have it now. He was going to have to get it out of there. He'd be a wanted man. Probably have to join the rebellion just to have a place to dock. Well, he'd hated home life anyway. What was the big deal about this book anyway? Maybe he should open it and find out. All that had been years ago. How many? The war was a blur. And now 3 Raven scouts. The rebellion was out of time. Unless Reynardo could bring a game changer. Maybe he could. Reynardo had found out where he could find the pieces of the Skyripper, the legendary weapon that had exiled the lost gods. Surely a legendary weapon could win the final battle. On the other hand, his old friend Lapino had sent Reynardo a desperate message saying he had a brilliant scheme to save the rebellion. If Reynardo could only rescue him. Reynardo dived the Farfarer towards the abyss. As he felt the heat of the jet stream, the Raven ships peeled off, not stable enough to follow him down there. Now it was time to choose. Lapino or the Skyripper. Wait. Where was the prison? The village was empty. The Ravens had taken the town. Reynardo had seen villages emptied like this. All the people taken away to be sacrificed in the Emperor's secret rituals. Reynardo hoped the people were just hiding. He wasn't that good. Yet. Ravens were landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lapino first, they'd eat him for breakfast. Or a snack. Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even top spies, like... It was starting to come back to him. Something you never completely forgot. Like how to freeze time when attacked. The more he fought, the more he'd probably remember. Reynardo felt a chill run down his back. Or possibly a flea. Dirty and bloody, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle.
We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who also happened to be a deadly sorcerer and own his only daughter? That would be worth it. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Skyripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. It's beautiful here, thought Renato. He was thrilled to be back with his old war buddy. He'd missed the mad rabbit, but something was not quite right. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. Renato felt wrong all over. He could feel an almost palpable sickness in the air. And if the land could have tumors, they would look like these monstrous crystals. Forests, quiet. There were insects, birds. He didn't have the raiders. Renato smelled sick animals, dying. No helping. Getting a bad feeling about this. Renato thought. Maybe Lapino was right. Maybe they should have kidnapped Zenobia instead of coming here. As he held the radiant icosahedron, Renato felt queasy, like dozens of tiny wood.
Tell you what,
Said Lapino.
I'll take it to the observatory. You attack the Imperial Outpost.
The Imperial Outpost was a vital communications node. Taking it could shatter the Empire's ability to coordinate. And it would be full of secret plans and maps and maybe even rebel prisoners. It was a good target for a hero like Renato. But what if Lapino got the core and then broke it or lost it? Or worse, was Renato ready to take that risk? Maybe it was better if he brought the core to the scientists himself. As Lapino vanished into the wilds of the Nexus, Renato vaguely remembered Lapino had a baby daughter, didn't he? And he told her mother he was going out to get some Easter eggs, and he'd never come back. But Renato was relieved not to carry the core anymore. He was already feeling better. And who knows, maybe this time Lapino would get it right. And if Renato could take the outpost, he'd have access to all the Empire's communications in the sector. Right? Renato caught his breath. His joints still hurt, but he couldn't feel the poison in his system anymore. He'd let the armature slip out of his hands to save his friend Lapino. Of course he had to let Lapino take the core. The rebellion needed every man doing his duty. And the rabbit would be no good taking on an Imperial outpost, right? Reynardo took the outpost with a song in his heart. Soon, he was stuffing his sack with key messages from and to the fleet. Then the far-speaker toad chortled a new message. The observatory had been sacked by ravens. Lapino and all the scientists had been taken to the mountains. Why? Why had he trusted Lapino again? And now the Empire had the core. Reynardo hailed the rebel base to warn them. But their far-speaker didn't crouch back. Was the base under attack too? There were Imperials everywhere in the ruins, and dead civilians. The ravens were killing everything in sight. Reynardo was relieved to see no rebels among the dead. Maybe the secret base was still secret, but there were huge burn marks on buildings. What monstrous weapon was the Empire using here? The core had great power. Had they harnessed it somehow, even if it didn't have the armature? He could smell charred flesh and hear screams. The ruins were on fire. But the ravens had rigged up the core as some kind of burning ray. They wouldn't need to know the secret location. They were burning everything. It was killing them too. Their black feathers littered the path. He would have to take the core from them. It was the last thing he wanted to do. Hero one. Your sword. Ice wall. Ice. As the last raven fell, Reynardo felt worse than he ever had. The core was killing him, again. The council members cautiously came out into the smoke. "You saved us," croaked the speaker. They would put the weaponized core deep in a cavern, she promised, where its poison could harm no one. They would heal him if they could, she said. No, he's a weapon now. We need one. I'll lead the charge. "It will kill you," croaked the speaker. "I guess it already has," Reynardo said. She bobbed her head gravely. "When all this is over," she said, "we'll name our new capital city for you." He flew towards the Imperial fleet. A myriad ships in disciplined formation, waiting for the signal to destroy the rebellion forever. Behind him, the rebels were charging. If he failed, they would die. And so the final battle began. Everything hurt. It was unpleasant to fight this way. With each blow he struck with his sword, he felt weaker. Yet each time the core fired, it got brighter, as if the heat from the burning ravens and buildings only fed its hunger. He wondered where Lapino was. Wasn't he supposed to be in the battle? No. He'd been captured, hadn't he? Oh, Reynardo's mind was smoking with the burning fleet. He hoped this wouldn't take long. That was awesome! Reynardo Iblis. Vulpus Major? Lando Nardo. If they were going to name a capital city after him, well, he just wished he had a better name. Where was Lapino? He missed Lapino's bitter outburst. Did he? Lapino had gotten him into this mess, hadn't he? The core was a wonderful weapon, swept fire across the fleet. Ravens exploded in its gaze, and with every heartbeat it grew brighter. He would die, but he would die every inch a hero. Spectacularly, changing history like the legendary heroes of lore. Or was it yore? No, he couldn't remember anymore. Reynardo fell to his knees. The Emperor's bodyguards were lined up before his ship. Fierce ravens, all. And Zenobia. She was conjuring. He could not take another step. All he could do was fire the core. The ravens, Zenobia, the ship, all burst into flames, disintegrated, and blew away. So they had one, after all. The core grew brighter. He shielded his eyes, but he could still see it through his sleeves and through the flesh of his arm. And then he felt heat, as the fire grew to consume both fleets. And then he felt nothing. Okay, that was weird. He could have sworn he just died. Instead, he was on the far... The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Skyripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Skyripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis Stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Reynardo. On the other hand, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Lapino was no game changer, but could Reynardo really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen the winged horse. He'd only sold it. But the village was empty. Had everybody fled the ravens? The ravens had taken the town. Reynardo had seen villages emptied like this. All the people taken away to be sacrificed in the Emperor's secret rituals. Reynardo hoped the people were just hiding.
Long live the Emperor! Ravens.
Ravens were landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lapino first, he'd eat him for breakfast. Or snack. Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even dirty and bloody, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle.
We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who also happened to be a deadly sorcerer and his only daughter? That would be worth it. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Skyripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. To make this... It's beautiful here, thought Renato. He was thrilled to be back with his old war buddy. He missed the mad rabbit. But something was not quite right. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. Who needed bridges anyway? Renato felt wrong all over. He could feel an almost palpable sickness in the air. And if the land could have tumors, they would look like these monstrous crystals. The forest was quieter than it had been. There were insects, but a few birds, if you didn't count the ravens. Renato smelled sick animals and dying ones, but no healthy ones. I'm getting a bad feeling about this, Renato thought. Maybe Renato felt like he was ready to learn new things. Thank goodness he didn't have to go to school for that. As he held the radiant icosahedron, Renato felt queasy, like dozens of tiny...
Tell you what, said Lapino. I'll take it to the observatory. You attack the Imperial Outpost.
The Imperial Outpost was a vital communications node. Taking it could shatter the Empire's ability to coordinate. And it would be full of secret plans and maps and maybe even rebel prisoners. It was a good target for a hero like Renato. But what if Lapino lost the core to the Empire? That could be a good thing, couldn't it? Was Renato ready to take that risk? Maybe it was better if he brought the core to the scientists himself. As Lapino vanished into the wilds of the Nexus, Renato vaguely remembered Lapino had a baby daughter, didn't he? And he told her mother he was going out to get some Easter eggs. They'd never come back. But Renato was relieved not to carry the core anymore. He was already feeling better. And who knows, maybe this time Lapino would get it right. And if Renato could take the outpost, he'd have access to all the Empire's communications in the sector. Right? Renato caught his breath. His joints still hurt, but he couldn't feel the poison in his system anymore. He'd let the armature slip out of his hands to save his friend Lapino. Of course he had to let Lapino take the core. The rebellion needed every man doing his duty. And the rabbit would be no good taking on an Imperial outpost, right? Reynardo took the outpost with a song in his heart. Soon, he was stuffing his sack with key messages from and to the fleet. The observatory had been sacked by ravens. Lapino and all the scientists had been taken to the mountains. Why? Why had he trusted Lapino again? And now the Empire had the core. Reynardo hailed the rebel base to warn them. But their far speaker didn't crouch back. Was the base under attack too? Reynardo felt a twinge of doubt. Should he have gone to the base? No. Logically, wherever they'd taken Lapino was probably where they took the core, right? Oh, why couldn't Lapino have just for once not got himself captured? Was that too much to ask? He shouldn't be too hard on the rabbit. Well, he meant well, and he was insanely brave. He had to admire that.
There was an inscription. Praise the sun.
Lapino anyway. There was no sign of him or the ravens who'd captured him. Just rocks and snow and the usual scouts. No sign of the core either. Was this a wild rabbit chase? Oh, trust Lapino to screw up even getting captured. But what was this rebellion for anyway? Oh, Lapino was a useless goof. But he was a friend. If friends didn't matter anymore, what was the point of winning this war?
What else could you hook? Reynardo thought about the intel he'd gathered from the outpost. Who would he bring it to? Who even had time to read it?
At the end of the mountain path, Reynardo came to a clearing. There was a campfire, raven feathers, and... oh, Lapino's lucky deck of cards. Well, that wasn't good. Reynardo hoped Lapino had not tried to cheat his captors at cards. Ravens were much better than weasels at counting, and they had a very poor sense of humor.
Then, he saw what he had hoped never to see. Fresh scraps of rabbit fur. Ragged and bloody, ravens would eat anything.
By Crabthar's hammer! Reynardo screamed at the sky. I will avenge you!
The rebels had assembled their fleet. Ahead, the clouds were dark with Imperial ships. If he could reach the Emperor before the rest of the rebels did, maybe he could settle this without too much bloodshed. He set sail, and the Farfarer shot forward.
Poor Lapino had never been a great warrior. The mad rabbit was good for a lark and a laugh. And a pint. The thought of ravens eating him made Reynardo furious. The way they were eating up the land. The way the Emperor was eating up the people with his new, bloodthirsty ways. He would make them all pay.
The portal was heavily guarded. Let's go someplace they really didn't want him to go.
hoped his hook didn't break. He had given up every objective to save his friend. He had given up the armature, the core, the gem, and even Zenobia. He loved Lapino, he realized. And now the rabbit was gone. A hero looks out for his friends, even when they're gone. He would send Lapino an honor guard of ravens to serve him in the halls of the Valiant. He would avenge him. It was a bit windy up here. Finally, he reached the Emperor's ship. And there was Lapino, surrounded by ravens. He was alive! They'd eaten some other rabbit. "I'll save you!" he shouted with joy and flung himself at the ravens. "Aw, you shouldn't have," said Lapino when the last raven was down. Renato threw his arms around his best friend. "I had to come. I love you, man. You really, really shouldn't have," said Lapino. And Renato felt a rather sharp pain in his back. As he collapsed, Lapino took the dagger out of Renato's back and wiped it off on Renato's sleeve. "Why, you always have to be the hero. Brave Renato, epic Renato, super sexy Renato, and I'm sick of it. But I loved you." "And you thought I was the idiot," said Lapino as Renato died. Renato stared at the book. He was still alive. Again. And still only flying away from burning. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Skyripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Skyripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis Stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Renato. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the ravens? As he set foot on the island, Renato couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lapino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did...
Sleep tight, thought Renato. The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Skyripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the Lost Gods, thousands of thousands had died. But Renato had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one. Zenobia could beat Renato at hot potato.
Can I borrow that?
Skyripper's Armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers, how is it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Skyripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. The truth is, though, he wanted to see her, wasn't it? It had been a dozen years since Swordfru School. He'd followed every rumor about her, every scrap of news. Not that he still loved her. After all, she was his enemy. No, it was solely because you know your enemy. But it would be great to see her, even if they faced off across sword points, as they'd done so many times at school. The world was a less interesting place without her. Huh? A lever? That was new. Most people still use... Renato wasn't entirely sure how he was going to capture Zenobia. She'd be expecting him. And he didn't have Lapino to cook up a clever plan. Why was it again that he hadn't got the core? Maybe because the results tended to be disastrous. These streets were familiar. The Swordfru School was closed now. But he had been down that street 1,000 times. He knew that pub. He knew that alley. He knew the alley behind it much too well. No wonder Renato slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Fine.
That makes no sense. It's a trap,
Shouted the Emperor.
I'll meet you at the outpost, and I'll bring my interrogators.
If Renato came face to face with the Emperor, maybe he could assassinate him. But maybe it would be smarter and safer to turn Zenobia against her father. It was a short, safe landing. At least this part of the Nexus hadn't changed too much. Zenobia had been taking him to the Imperial Outpost. She'd never expect him to go there by himself. Well, maybe she would. Never knew with her. There was an inscription on the platform. Balaleka lessons, with an address.
Zenobia, and Zenobia knew him. She'd suspected a trick. Now he'd vanished. She would probably guess that was his plan all along. Perfect. Maybe she wouldn't use the Skyripper. At least not without taking it to the scientists at the observatory first. Meanwhile, the Emperor would be coming to the Outpost personally. This could be good. I'll just have a dash, thought Renato. Renato was face to face with the Emperor's bodyguard. They looked very tough, but the Emperor held them back. Oh, well, that's a job well done, thought Renato. Now the fleet will be in all sorts of disarray. But maybe he could find her in the mountains. She always used to go to the mountains to hide from the world. Maybe he could even turn her against her father. Or maybe he could reap the benefits of the chaos he had sown. It was time to report to the Rebel Council, and then launch the attack on a divided and very confused Imperial fleet. He wondered if he should have just told her the truth about her father. The Emperor had adopted her from a stray. That was the source of all her loyalty. But even then, he'd been dreaming of a bargain with the lost gods. They alone could make him immortal. The Emperor would have to seal that bargain with the life of someone who truly loved him. And who else truly loved the Emperor? But how could Renato tell her that now? Why would she ever believe him? What did you do? The funny thing was, she should have trusted him. He told her the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Oh, all right. The truth was, he played her like a fiddle. And how often had he ever done that? She was so smart. Smarter than him, really. There were more pylons he could use the hook on. Really needed to construct additional pylons. Renato had given away the location of the secret base. Fortunately, the Emperor thought it was all a trap. He even mistrusted his own daughter. Renato couldn't have done better if he'd planned it. What have you done to me? Zenobia demanded. My own father thinks I'm a traitor. So? But I'm loyal. So what? You're a bastard, Renato, she said. Now, you love that about me. You really did want the core, didn't you? And the Iblis Stone. Yep. He gloated. You get all that? she said to the far speaker toad he'd failed to spot.
I am so relieved, my daughter,
said the far speaker. And Zenobia got into her ship and flew off. Damn it. The old far speaker trick. How had he missed it? This was very bad. Zenobia back in her father's good graces, and both of them ready to use the core and the Iblis Stone. He got back on the Farfarer. Briefly, Renato thought of fleeing. The odds were surely against him. Never tell me the odds, he told himself. Odds confused him. He preferred to trust his gut. And so he sailed on to attack the fleet. Alone, if necessary. There were not many rebels here, and they were disorganized. The Empire had obviously attacked the secret base. The formerly secret base, whose location Renato had so helpfully pinpointed on a map. There was still time to turn around, wasn't there? But Renato hated turning around. Heroes don't turn around, they just own their screw-ups and turn them into impossible victories, right? This is quite the view, he thought. The odd thing was, Bernardo's personal battle was going fairly well. The Ravens immediately in front of him were no quicker or tougher than usual. Where was the power of the core? Blasting him off into the abyss. And where was Zenobia? She must be up to something. But whatever it wasn't his problem. Not yet, anyway. It was all going surprisingly well. Can't we just agree to disagree? Said Renato. No? Mustache, thought Renato. At last, he came to Zenobia and the Emperor. She was sealing up a kind of squat coffin, banded with lead.
So glad you're here,
croaked the Emperor.
You will be witness to my final victory.
That's creepy, Dad, said Zenobia. But thank you. Because of your shenanigans, we tested the core. It's really unstable. It could have blown us all up.
It could, said Renato, a little frustrated that she'd figured it out.
Anyway, we already destroyed your secret base, so we don't need a super weapon. We're just going to bury it. Do we, torture you? Or give you a medal? Sometime later, Renato got an invitation to attend the Emperor's ritual sacrifice of his daughter. They took him out of his dungeon cell and gave him all his medals to wear. A little while after that, the lost gods returned, and the sun went black, and the Emperor ate his soul. And just like that, he was alive again, and back on the Farfarer, still fleeing. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Skyripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Skyripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis Stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Renato. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Every child could sing verses about the Skyripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away. Were all these things the Iblis Stone? Long hidden in the buried temple, another ancient item that was only resurfacing now, drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals?
Before I kill you guys, Renato said, do any of you know what I can do smoothie around here?
The Ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late. He missed his old skills. He welcomed them back like it was at a reunion. Landed a claw on him. Renato was running out of ideas. Zenobia loved him to death. The Skyripper destroyed everything. Lapino was a twisted traitor. Using a stone named for an evil god seemed unwise. But what else was there?
Renato danced around the room yelling, oh yeah, that's how we do it.
The Ravens at least could not get past this point. Obviously the temple builders knew how to deal with Tomb Raiders. Once met a pirate captain who used hooks to get around his ship. What was his name again? It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void. It was the stone. Eager. Thirsty. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once, and Reynardo wasn't sure he really wanted to be Emperor. Why not capture the core of Skyripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. "Not the core," said the stone anxiously. The moment he landed the Farfarer, Reynardo had a rare feeling of regret. It's not too late, he thought. He could turn around and sail for Zenobia's island. He frowned. Wait a minute. He didn't want to kill Zenobia, did he? Sure, technically she was the enemy, but they'd been at Sword Fu school together. They'd never been lovers, but somehow they'd been closer. She'd told him there was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. Where did that go to? The stone hadn't lied about what it could do for him. With each raven he cut down, he felt a jolt of power flowing into his arm. "You're weak," whispered the stone. "Are you afraid of it?" "Don't be ridiculous." It chuckled. "The fact it's stable. It will poison you so much as to carry it, and if you try to use it, it will explode catastrophically." Reynardo did not trust rocks that talked in his head. He went onwards. As he approached the core, the stone became hysterical. He had defeated the demonic gem with the power of his mind. He felt invincible. It was time to attack the Imperial outpost on the Nexus. Take the battle to the enemy. But among the huge crystals, there was also an observatory. A wise man would probably ask the scientists exactly what he had first. How wise was he? The Nexus was infested with ravens, but that didn't bother Reynardo. With each death, the converted Iblis Stone in his gauntlets glowed brighter, and he felt stronger. Wow. He was getting a bit bloodthirsty, wasn't he? Well, he wasn't worse. He was a warrior. They're supposed to be bloodthirsty. Absorbed in the stone was doing its job perfectly. Reynardo could feel a little eldritch jolt every time he downed a raven, but then it flowed into the glowing stone the way water flows down a riverbed. It all felt perfectly natural, as if all his life, this was what he had been meant to do.
Reynardo tore through the last remaining guards at the outpost like hot coffee through snow. There was a far speaker toad here. And she was. She wanted him to come back to base. They had plans to discuss, and a medal to give him. A large, golden medal. Great, said Reynardo. Let's talk about who else I can kill. Then the far speaker croaked again.
Hello, Reynardo,
It said.
If you get sick of slaughtering second-rate birds in the Nexus, I'm waiting for you in the mountains.
Zenobia. She missed him. She loved him. Once she saw how awesome he'd become, maybe she'd join him. They'd kiss and... Well, if she did refuse for some reason, he was no match for him now. So where was this ambush? Reynardo couldn't wait. At Sword Fu school, she'd always studied a little harder, practiced a little longer, complained really a lot less. And then she'd become a sorceress. He'd always known he'd have to take her by surprise or not at all. But this would be a surprise indeed. I think this is yours, said Reynardo. But he couldn't hear his enemy's answer. This thing really... The mountain paths were infested with ravens. That was swell. Every time he cut one down, the stone glowed a little brighter. In fact, everything glowed a little brighter. How white the snow was. And how very blue the raven blood was. Seriously, where was she? He wanted to try his new strength against hers. Look down, he thought. Reynardo felt antsy. He found a source of great power. But instead of joining with the rebel, he was on a fool's errand the Emperor's daughter had sent him on. The rebels were preparing a last-ditch attack against the Imperial fleet, counting on Reynardo to show up. At the end of the path was Zenobia. I thought you were going to ambush me, he said, a little put out. I owe you better than that. I know how you feel about me, love. You want to join up with me, don't you? You got to admit, we'd make a great team. Of all the arrogant, ham-handed, half-assed, half-witted... Oh, come on. What else are you here for? That, she said, as a dropship poured a bucket of green liquid on his head. Drowsy gas. You can't stop me with drowsy gas, Zenobia. My power's too strong. Zenobia? Where was she? When he awoke, he was staring up at the sky. Zenobia looked down at him, frowning. I probably ought to kill you, but that'd be a bit tawdry, wouldn't it? She was tossing the glowing stone from paw to paw. This is pretty.
Zenobia!
He shouted. And then he fell back into sleep. On the Farfarer, Renato drank his favorite headache remedy. But it did no good. Zenobia had beaten him again. Oh, he really should have listened to the Iblis Stone in the first place instead of messing around with the core. He had a bad feeling about the upcoming fight, but what kind of hero misses the final battle? Renato was bruised and tired. He wasn't looking forward to killing ravens. It didn't even seem scary. It felt like a chore, like sweeping the practice room at Swordfu School, which he'd done his best to leave for Zenobia whenever he could. What would she do with the glowing Iblis Stone? That should terrify him, shouldn't it? But he just focused on shooting. He carved his way to the most probable. Imagine getting a horse up in one of these things. He would be cursing a blue streak. It was all so unfair. He'd wanted to protect himself, protect the world from the Iblis Stone's hunger for blood and souls. And all he'd done is get mugged. Next time he owned a supernatural artifact that wanted tribute, he'd serve it champagne and caviar. What were these poles exactly? Parking meters from the time of the lost gods? Zenobia was cleaning blood off her sword and weeping. It's so hungry. I can't stop killing, she said. But I fed it the core of the Skyripper, and now it's hungry again. She wept. It was true. The Iblis Stone was black again, a void that seemed to suck all the light out of the sky. Take it from me, Renato, while you still can. Okay. I'll take it, he said. Yes, he thought. This is what it means to be a hero. To save the soul of even his old enemy when it looked like all was lost. He stepped forward to accept the sword from her outstretched hand. She flipped the sword, and the blade went into his gut. As the Iblis Stone sucked his soul into its infinite darkness, he could vaguely hear a voice, something like Zenobia's chuckle. Sucker. Oh. Damn it. He lost again. And died. But there... The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose.
The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Skyripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Renato finally realized that Lapino was a traitor to the cause, and maybe Renato could use that somehow. Renato couldn't quite put his paw on when he'd realized Lapino was working for the Empire. He'd never exactly seen Lapino sending coded messages to the palace, but he was sure. The rabbit had been on too many disastrous missions where he was the only survivor, or where he accidentally missed getting on the boat that went down to the abyss in flames. If Renato could prevent Lapino from getting back to the fleet with all the intelligence he'd probably gathered, it might be worth the trip. How had they come to this? They'd been on so many adventures together. Lapino had talked Renato out of prison at least 4 times, and Renato had rescued Lapino from at least 2 lynchmen. Resented him. Lapino was hilarious because he was so down on himself and everyone else. But behind the laughs, he wasn't a happy camper. Ooh, was this payback? Or did the Empire have his little white tail in a vice? Everywhere from dropships. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lapino first, the rabbit would give the Empire all the intelligence he'd been stealing from the rebellion, and they'd probably give him a medal. He'd have to be very careful about how he played Lapino. At the slightest hint of danger, the mad rabbit would take off like a... Bloody and exhausted, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing shuffling his favorite... Oh, I am! The ravens are coming! Now, I got a clever plan to kidnap Zenobia. Renato wanted to clap shackles on the rabbit and shout, "You're a traitor, and I'm not falling for it." But if there was one thing Renato was sure of, it was that the core of the Skyripper was dangerous mostly to its user. If he could put it in the Emperor's hands, old Isengrim III might blow himself and his fleet up with it. Yes, that was it. Right. Now, all Renato had to do was fight his way through Zenobia's invading troops, sneak onto her ship and into her bedroom, and kidnap her without any of her dozens of guards alerting her. Then, he would rely on her love for him to convince her how evil her father was, so she'd run away with him instead of going back to her father, who was going to blow himself up. It did sound a little risky. But Renato had a feeling it would work out somehow. It always did. blood was up. He just needed to smash something. Renato was halfway to Zenobia's encampment when Lapino showed up. He was disheveled and distraught. They jumped us. I barely got away. Oh, they got the core. Oh, it was all going according to plan, thought Renato. Now he just needed Zenobia on his side. Yes, that was even better. The Iblis Stone. Zenobia could get it. And then the Emperor would have to pursue them. Wait. No. The gem would corrupt anyone. Even her. That's it, he thought. Even Lapino. Even though Lapino was already a traitor. It would turn him against his secret master, the Emperor. He would try to make himself Emperor. And the Emperor would have to defend himself with the core. Boom. He was a super genius. This is terrible, Renato told the rabbit. If only I had gone for the Iblis Stone. But now it's lost in enemy territory. He handed Lapino a map. It gives the bearer so much power. We can only hope the Emperor never finds it. What was that? Said Lapino. I think someone's following us. I didn't hear anything. Rabbit ears. You go on ahead. I'll check it out. And with that, Lapino hopped off with the map. If I craft a sword now, it's going to be really short. Everybody who wants to die, raise your weapon. All right. Renato slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. She was curled up on her bed. He'd forgotten how beautiful she was, how sleek, how soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She was made of smoke, and he noticed he had a very solid blade to his throat. Did you really think you could capture me? Purred a familiar voice. I just wanted to chat, said Renato. Did you ever wonder why the Emperor adopted you? He needs a sacrifice. Someone who truly loves him, to make a bargain with the lost gods. That's a vicious lie. He wants to bring them back. That's crazy. Why would anyone... They could make him immortal. An eater of souls. And with that, her eyes widened. She understood. Renato told her how he had rescued a priest whose order had been massacred. How he had slept in a burnt village. At midnight, the Emperor's victims had come to him in his dreams to tell him of the hideous eldritch rituals they'd been sacrificed in. He could still see those kittens and puppies. Their wide, sad eyes, their moist noses. You can't prove that. I've got a witness at the observatory. He couldn't... Not really. The rebellion had started after atrocities that the Empire hushed up. Renato had rescued a priest whose order had been massacred for one book. He had slept in a burnt village. Dead kittens and puppies had come to tell him what the Emperor had done to them.
What was really fun was hooking yourself onto a moving ship. Much in the way of safety features, did it? The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The Ravens had taken special care. So, Renato explained his brilliant gambit. Sending Lapino to get the Iblis Stone, become super powerful and corrupted, provoke the Emperor into using the core against him, thus blowing up both of them, and hopefully the fleet too. "Let me visit your council," she said, shaken. "I want to help." Could he really trust her? What had Zenobia gone off to do? What was more important than meeting the rebel council? Had he made a mistake, sending her to the ruins? No. He knew they could trust each other. He could trust her because she never broke her word. And she could trust him because she could see right through him. Well, she'd probably be there well before him. She at least didn't have to fight her way through rainstorms of ravens. Missed her. Not Zenobia. Hypatia, the kid's mother. Renato had never thought he'd date a librarian. He'd always figured himself for the barmaid type. But then, he'd never figured the library of Ubar would have comic books, or that Hypatia would know anything about them. He missed her. That was always a rush. As he came around the bend, there was Lapino, unconscious on the side of the path. And Renato could smell a familiar, sweet, smoky scent. Who? Zenobia. It had to be. She never used a combat spell when she could use drowsy gas. That meant she had the Iblis Stone. What would it do to her? She hated her father now. She'd kill him for sure. The council wouldn't mind if she killed the Emperor, but murdering her father destroyed her. He had to get to whatever ledge she was on and talk her down from it. Renato. The long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. He was on fire. So far, so good. Bye-bye, life, he thought. Hello, emptiness. Everyone in the council chamber was dead. Zenobia stood shivering in the courtyard, drenched in blood. Why? He managed. They started arguing with me. I lost my temper and I wanted their blood. Well, not me. The stone did. Why did you take it from Lapino? I had a plan. You had a stupid plan, she said. I'm going to go kill my father now. No, you can't. You'll just take his place. You'll become worse than him. Get out of my way, or I'll kill you too. The Empire had seized his ship. They'd have to take it back. Come in handy in a pinch. Zenobia was in no shape to fight, but he never fought so well. He wasn't fighting for money or loot or a cause. He was fighting for her. For them. His sword danced, his feet flew, and the ravens recoiled from his ferocity. There was an engraving. Maximum capacity, 130 people. There it was. Renato wondered if his future self had commissioned these poems. But they did not go unnoticed. Scout ships lifted off, and a long lance of the Imperial flagship. Renato turned downwind to gain speed. The Raven ships could pursue, but they couldn't close. The Far Speaker croaked, "You return her and live!" "Go sacrifice yourself," yelled Renato. "Then you won't have her either." On the flagship, the Emperor was readying some arcane weapon. It couldn't be. It was the Core. A devastating beam lanced out of the flagship. Renato zigzagged wildly to keep the Farfair out of it. Now the Raven scout ships were closing the distance, and the beam was getting closer too. Then came a blinding flash, and the air was searingly hot all around him. There was a thunderous, deafening roar. He could smell burnt oak and burnt feathers and burnt flesh. But when he could hear and see again, they were alive and unhurt. And they were alone in the sky. Zenobia embraced him. They had done it. Through luck and through love, they had won the war. "Avalon, here we come," he said as he held her arms wide in the prow of the boat and let her feel its speed. "Maybe the real Avalon is wherever we're together," she said. And so, after a bit of an argument, Renato and Zenobia went to one of the two Avalons. The one shrouded in mists, or the one in their hearts. But which one they went to, I'll never tell. He'd done it. He'd forged his own destiny. Well, he hadn't actually done it, but he knew what he would do. Renato smiled at the book. He practically wanted to kiss it. The kid's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. He'd saved the book and saved the world. Renato owed him and his mother so much. Renato lowered the mainsail and let the Farfarer shoot forward in the breeze. Second star to the right, and straight on till morning. This time, he would win.